Well, it's 1:30 or 3:30 or 4:30, depending on where you are. So we are going to go ahead and get started with Let's Eat, the food mysteries. And we have a smorgasbord of authors here. Rather than me reading bios, what we're most interested in are the books, right? So I'm going to ask everybody to introduce themselves with their name, their main character, and sort of the theme of your book or of your series. Bharti, can we start with you?
Oh, sure. Thank you very much. First of all, my thanks to Reilly and Boucher Khan for giving us this opportunity to talk about our books, and I'm really delighted to be here. I'm sorry that we're not there in person, but this will have to do for now. So my name is Bharti Kirchner, and my private detective's name is Maya Mallik, and there's a Maya in our panel also. She was born in India, moved to the US, to go to school, and now she lives in Seattle. In her detective work, she helps women who are in trouble. One of the themes of my latest book, which is called Murder at Andaman. Now, the book isn't out yet, it'll be out in December, so I'll show you the first of the series, which is called Season of Sacrifice. That's been out for a couple of years. So that's the book. But in one of the themes of the book is friendship among women, how durable it can be. So in this story, a book publisher is killed while he's on vacation in Andaman Islands. Now I'll talk a little bit later about the island, but his wife, Lee, who is my private detective Maya's best friend, is suspected of murder. So now Maya is torn. She wants to help her friend. She travels to Andaman. She wants to help her friend to find the killer. At the same time, she's not sure that her friend is innocent. So the theme of the book is, or the central question is, can a friendship last under a situation in which one person is suspected of murder? So that's
wonderful. Thank you, Bharti. Leslie, can we go to you next?
Sure. I'm Leslie Karst, and I write the Sally Solari mystery series. They're culinary mysteries, and they take place in beautiful Santa Cruz, California, where I've lived since 1974. And Sally Solari, the protagonist of my series, is a fourth generation Italian-American. The family goes back from the 1890s, and this is actually based on fact. The Italians came to Santa Cruz from Liguria, and they were fishermen, and then a lot of them opened restaurants, and her family owns a restaurant out on the historic wharf here in Santa Cruz. The restaurant's fictional, though, so I can kill people there. and she, in the first book, inherits her aunt's French Polynesian restaurant. So a lot of restaurants in the family. And a little bit about her, she's about 40. She loves all things food, of course, but she also loves cycling, as do I. You can see my bike back there. And the San Francisco Giants and dogs and single barrel bourbon are some of her favorite things. As far as the theme of the books, the most recent one is here, Murder from Scratch. And there are 4 of them out so far. A 5th has been written, but it hasn't come out yet. And I'd say that, obviously food is one of the main themes. I think that's probably true for all of us. But it's, in this particular book, it's how food connects her family, her friends, and the community of Santa Cruz. But there's also a sub-theme to each of the books, which you might not notice if I didn't tell you, but it's fun for me. Each one of the books involves one of the 5 senses. So the first book, Dying for a Taste, is obviously taste. The second one, A Measure of Murder, Sally joins a local community chorus, and they're singing the Mozart Requiem. I'm a chorister too. And so that's the sense of hearing, and in all these things, they sort of have something to do with the murder. The third one is Death al Fresco, and she decides she gets interested in Gauguin because that's the painter that her restaurant is named after, and she starts taking a plein air painting class. And that one is the sense of vision, and that seeing things kind of helps with the solving of the crime. And this most recent one, Murder from Scratch, she takes in a distant cousin who's only 20 years old, and she's blind, and her mother has just died. And so it's actually, you'd think it would be the sense of sight, but it's actually the sense of touch, because Evelyn, this young blind woman, her sense of touch is more, it's more, I would say advanced, I don't know. Anyway, she has a heightened sense of touch because of her being blind, and it helps her and Sally solve the mystery of who killed her mother. And so, you know, that's just sort of fun, but believe me, they're mostly about food. So.
Fantastic. How about Shawn?
Hi, I'm Shawn Reilly Simmons, and I'm so happy to be with you all today, you know, via Zoom. I wish we were all together, but it's nice to be here, at least in some way. I write the Red Carpet Catering Mystery Series. There are 7 in that series right now. There's an 8th written, but it's not published yet. My books take place on movie sets, and they're inspired by, I used to do that job, so was my motivation for writing that type of culinary mystery. Through my work at Malice and just being involved with Malice for so many years, I've read a ton of culinary mysteries and really kind of idolized, you know, certain authors that I really, you know, enjoyed reading. And I thought, well, maybe that's something I could do, because I've always worked in food. I've worked in restaurants and catering, you know, businesses and different things. And I thought, well, maybe that's something I can do, but what would be my thing I could do that was different? And I had never heard of a movie set caterer. So I went ahead and that was my thing. So I love the books. And I think the central theme of the books has always been family. And as Leslie was saying, food does bring everyone together. Everyone has to eat, but you might as well enjoy it. And if it can be a thing where you bring your family together, that's even better. And I've always liked to play with the idea of family is you have the one that you're born with, and then there's the one that you create along the way and put together for yourself. And Penelope Sutherland is my main character, and she's the head chef and owner of her own catering company. And she's a young, ambitious woman in a sort of a male-dominated industry, and she really has to sort of fight for her place, and doesn't really have a close family. So she's really gathered these friends and people that she really would stand up for and fight for. In each book, she sort of delves further into those relationships. So that's the theme of mine. And I've written a number of short stories, and for some reason I always land back on food. I just can't get away from it. So I write a short story, and generally speaking, they have some kind of food element to them as well. And I guess I'm just obsessed with food. So there's nothing else I can say about that. So
you're in the right place then today. The most recent one is
Murder on the Chopping Block, which came out last fall. So.
Gotcha. Mm-hmm. All right. Thank you, Shawn. Nancy, can we move to you next?
Oh, sure. So, hi, I'm glad to be here. My name is Nancy Parra. I also write as Nancy Coco and Nell Hampton, and those two authors love food, so they're both foodie. But my Nancy Coco books are set on Mackinac Island. And what I actually did for the inspiration for the book was I contacted the Island bookstore, and they were wonderful. They went and did a survey of their readers. During that survey, they found out that they were really interested in fudge bakers. So
Nancy, you're frozen for us. I don't know if it's a lag in internet connection. Is Nancy frozen for everybody? There you are. You were frozen for us for a bit.
Oh no. Okay. Well, I kept talking, so that's how Zoom goes. Anyway, my book comes out in a couple of weeks, and it's Have Yourself a Fudgy Little Christmas.
Thank you.
Sure. Thank you.
Maya, can we move to you next?
Sure. I'm Maya Corrigan. I write the 5 ingredient mysteries. They take place on the eastern shore of Maryland near the Chesapeake Bay and feature a 30-something cafe manager and her live wire grandfather solving mysteries in the town. And Granddad is someone that Val moved in with him about 2 years ago. Her mother sent her there to put him on a healthy diet because he'd been eating junk food since his wife died. But once Val gets there and cooks for him, he decides that the only way he's going to get to eat what he really likes is to learn to cook himself. But he won't try anything with more than 5 ingredients. So that he gives the series its name, The 5 Ingredient Mysteries, and each book has 5 suspects, 5 clues, and Granddad's 5 ingredient recipes. So the latest book is the 7th one in the series. It is called, I don't know if you can see it, Ginger Dead Man. And if you can see, there
Get
is
down just a little bit.
Down. That's
There you
it?
go.
Okay. So the inspiration for this book is sitting right here. You may not be able to read the title, but the book is A Christmas Carol by Charles Dickens. And the book takes place during the town's Dickens of a Holiday Festival. And Val and Granddad are volunteers, like all the other town volunteers, dressed as Victorians, and they each have a job to do. Val is serving English tea parties to the tourists who come to the festival. And Granddad is playing Scrooge. Now, he's not happy about that because he expected to play Santa as usual in the town, but a newcomer has usurped his role. Now, as the Dickens Festival winds down on the first day, Val is catering a tea party for the volunteers. And they include a now very soused Santa, Granddad is Scrooge, Ghost of Christmas Past, and some other Dickens characters. And then an uninvited guest crashes the party. He's shrouded in a black, I want to say he, but I shouldn't say that, shrouded in a black garment. Looks like the eeriest ghost in A Christmas Carol, and he distributes gift bags to each of the volunteers. And when Santa is the first to open his gift bag, he finds a gingerbread cookie in it, but it's not the usual smiling gingerbread man. I don't know, you can see on the cover one gingerbread man. Can you see him? He's a little different from the others. He is a ginger dead man. Instead of a smile, his bones are outlined in white icing. Well, even though he's kind of creepy, the cookie-loving Santa can't leave it alone. So he chomps down on it, and you pretty much can guess what happens next. Now, he is only the first of the victims because there seems to be someone in town who's leaving anonymous gifts of sweets that are poison. So it's up to Val and Granddad to solve a couple of murders and capture the cookie cutter killer. And like a lot of, like Dickens' Christmas Carol, the theme is how do you get the Christmas spirit back again when you have somebody killing people in the town. And ultimately, of course, food, family, friends, the same values that Dickens has in his book are reaffirmed when the killer is captured.
Great, thank you, Maya. And Judy.
Yes, hi. I'm Judy Alter, and I don't show, you show, Mary Lou. But anyway, no, that's not me either. This is my new book. I don't know if you can see it.
Mm-hmm.
I'm up there in the corner. Saving Irene. And Irene is the chef on the cover. She is a second-tier TV chef on an independent channel in Chicago, which you know means she's not on the Food Network. She's not a big deal, but she has pretensions. She claims she went to Le Cordon Bleu. She claims a French background. She throws French phrases around. She's just a bit of a diva. The book really belongs not to Irene, but to her gopher or assistant, Henrietta, better known as Henny James. And Henny tells us of her life with Irene, and it's pretty fraught. Henny's the one that researches recipes, does the grocery shopping, does most of the work. There's murder, there's kidnapping, there's intrigue, there's gossip, and there's lots of food. Henny has a thing, one of the themes is, Henny is a proponent of American cooking, and Irene away from all this fadella and try and introduce some things that people can cook in their own kitchens. So that's one of the themes. And I think the other theme is that lies. And deceptions we tell ourselves and others is her own mistakes. So, oops, my internet connection is unstable.
Yeah, you were frozen for just a bit, and then it looks like you're back.
Yeah, it looks like it's on. Whoop! I just went away. I'll try to reconnect.
Judy, I think you need to click on the gallery view, and then you'll see everybody at once.
Okay.
Go to the top right of your screen.
No, I don't. I've got just a Zoom screen. I'll work it out. Y'all go on. Oh, there. Okay.
We're all figuring this out together. So one of the questions.
I just did it.
Cool.
Excuse me.
One of the questions we've had in chat is if we all have recipes in our books. Do you all have recipes in your books?
No, I don't put recipes simply because I find that if people are reading, they get distracted by recipes, and it's better, I don't put them, but somebody else does, I appreciate that.
So I, like Shawn, came to writing culinary mysteries because I loved some of the culinary mysteries that I was reading and was fascinated with those. And looked for something that was not being done and something that I could relate to. I'm sort of fascinated that even though we all do culinary mysteries, we've got all sorts of different settings. None of our settings are the same. None of the sort of roles of the characters are the same. Some of you have touched on this in your introduction, but could you talk a little bit about what gave you the idea for your series? And Judy, we'll start with you this time.
Okay, I'm not sure where I got the idea. I'm a pantser. I love to cook, fascinated by food, and part of me wishes I was a food writer. So that and a trip back to Chicago, my hometown, kind of all went together, and I just came up with this Irene woman. I don't know where she came from, but something you said, the different roles of chefs and different roles in the novels. I'm teaching an online course right now on creating the fictional chef, and one of the points I've made to them is that not everybody who is a chef runs a restaurant. There are lots of roles, from private catering to institutional work to all kinds of things that you can do and be involved in food. So then I felt like I'd fallen into a stereotype with Irene, who really is a chef.
But that's what she had when she came to you, right?
Right. We have French and all.
Maya, what about you? What gave you the idea?
Well, what gave me the idea is that I am not a chef. I'm not a caterer. I never was any of those food professionals, but I've spent a lot of years cooking meals for a family and learned early, like when I had 2 preschoolers and 2 jobs, that I wanted to get dinner on the table quickly. So I started collecting recipes that didn't have a lot of ingredients and didn't take long to prepare. So when I decided to write a cozy mystery, I didn't see many mysteries that were like that. There were a lot with people who made fancy food, and I thought, well, maybe I'll go in another direction. The idea for the 5 ingredients came from my father, who taught himself to cook when he was in his 80s, but he would never try anything. Well, he liked to keep the ingredients down to a low number. And he would always, when he invited me to dinner, he'd say, how is it? Is it good? I'd say, oh yes, it's really good. Only 3 ingredients. So he always stressed that. So he got to be the inspiration for Granddad.
For the 5 ingredient.
For the 5 ingredients, right.
Nancy, I know you have a background in business, so I love that you actually went to the source for, you know, what are people looking for in terms of food and stories. So talk a little bit more about how the idea evolved.
Oh, sure. Well, I think I'm part of the foodie mystery series people because I grew up baking. I think I made my first cake from scratch when I was 5. So then I did all these 4-H things, and I was always cooking and baking, and that was one of my chores in the house, and I love it. So when I went to the Island bookstore and they told me that their readers were interested in a fudge maker who lived on the island and solved mysteries, well, of course, then I created Allie, and she and I together have had a lot of fun trying to figure out original recipes. Originally, I was supposed to come up with like 10 original recipes per book. And about my 3rd or 4th book, I said, there's only, can I quit with this fudge and kind of move on into fudgy things? Because I was running out of ways to come up with new forms of fudge. But every day I see online forms of fudge come up in recipes. So that's really interesting. And I have a good time trying them out and thinking about what Allie would do.
Shawn, yours is such a unique movie set, catering, and your background clearly influenced that. But how did the story idea evolve?
Well, I didn't really know. I'm a pantser as well, and I had always wanted to write a book. And I thought, well, I had done like editing and other things, kind of circling around the idea of writing for a long time, and I just never really sat down and did it. Had my son 10 years ago, and the decision, I just decided I was going to stay home with him. I said, now I can write a book. I will be able to write up a baby. It's no big deal, you know. Of course, that's, you know, you're exhausted, but I managed to write during naps and in early mornings and things like that. When I finally sat down, I thought, well, what is the thing? You know, it was the write what you knew kind of thing. And that's the only thing I really know how to do. Besides, before that, I was a marketing executive in New York. And I'm like, well, that would be a pretty boring mystery. Like, oh, did I make my quota today? You know, that I just didn't understand. I didn't think that would be a good place to start. So I thought, oh, you know, I've always cooked. I've always done that. And I had that, like you said, the unique experience working on movie sets, which is, it's a very cool thing to be able, that I've got to do. And it's just hard to explain. You know, you wake up at 4 a.m. and we're the first ones there, and you might work until 8 o'clock, 10 o'clock that night. Like you're on set the whole, you start it and you finish it. And so much happens throughout the whole day, and you're meeting 300 people a day. So I thought that is fertile ground for somebody is going to get killed here. You know, somebody could make somebody mad and someone's going to get murdered, and there's actresses and there's sex and drama and whatever. So I thought that was a great place to start to write a mystery. So I just sat down and wrote it. It wasn't really like, I did not plan it out. I just sat down and thought about it. But once I got rolling, I really, really loved it. And I was inspired by my heroes, you know, Agatha Christie and, you know, Catherine Hall Page. I love her books. And I was, you know, I had a lot of wonderful women writers to look up to and to follow in their steps. And I'm very grateful for all of that. It all came together in the end. So.
Great. Leslie, your books always make me not only want to cook, but hungry. You have some background. You talked about sort of the family element, but how did this story idea come together?
Well, I'm sure this is true of every single one of us and probably every single one of the audience members. I've been delighted by the taste and texture and the presentation of food since I was a little kid. And so some of you might not know, my previous vocation was I was an attorney. And so while I was working as an attorney, actually, I went back to school at night and got a degree in culinary arts. And so guess which one was more fun, by the way? No brainer. Anyway, so I knew it when I decided, I retired from the law and I decided I wanted to write a mystery novel, because it's actually not that different from writing a legal brief. That's a whole nother subject. So then the question was, what was it going to be about? And I thought, well, it has to be about food, obviously. I love food. I want to write about food. And I had the experience from culinary arts, so I could write about the front of the house and the back of the house of a restaurant and do all that. But the other thing that hit me is I really wanted to write about my town of Santa Cruz. It's a really special place. I've been here since 1974. When I first moved here, the university, go banana slugs, had just come in about 8 years earlier, and it was starting to really change the town, which had originally been a lot of retirees, the Italian fishermen that I talked about, farmers, and then with the advent of the late 1960s and the 70s, the complexion of the town started to completely change. And so all the first hippies, and then the hipsters, and then the techies started moving in, and with them came the food revolution. And as a result, there became this sort of schism in the town. There were the old school Italian restaurants, seafood places, but then there were all these more chez panisse style, foodie, trendy places. And so I was trying to figure out what to do for the first book, and this is an actual true story. I was walking down the Fisherman's Wharf, looking at the old Italian restaurants, and I thought, oh, what if I meet my gal, she's an Italian American, but she's young and she's hip, and she's caught in the middle. Her family, so this is what ended up happening. Her dad has this restaurant, Solari's, old school. She inherits her sort of black sheep of the family aunt's restaurant, Gauguin, which is more like a chez panisse kind of thing. And she finds herself caught in the middle. Her dad's thinking, you're not good enough for us anymore. And so it's this sort of, it gives a sort of a background tension to the books. And so I thought, yeah, perfect backstory for a culinary mystery. So that's where they came from.
Great. Bharti.
Oh, thank you. I was actually a cookbook author before I started writing novels, and also a food writer for many of the well-known magazines at the time. Also, I was born and raised in India, which is a very strong food culture, many of you know, and I still go back there quite often. I now live in Pacific Northwest. In one of my trips back home, I happened to visit the Andaman Islands. Now, these are the set of islands, they look like a necklace, a set of islands, a chain of islands in the Indian Ocean, and it's actually an Indian territory, it's an Indian state. So it's populated by Indians. So I happened to be there on vacation, and it's a beautiful, tranquil place, and no crime really, just pickpockets once in a while, and people live more or less peacefully. So, but while I was there, it made me wonder, what if there was a horrible crime taking place here? What would happen then? And underneath all this beauty and the calmness, what if there was another set of things going on that's not visible? And that's how I got the idea, and that got me kind of intrigued. And of course, the place has Andaman Islands has a lot of good food, especially seafood, as you might expect, but also other kinds of food. And my two characters that I mentioned, the two friends that are there, they both love to get together and try out different restaurants. So I was able to show a lot of the food there. And interestingly enough, yeah, that just carries the book forward.
Great. One of the questions in chat and attendees, if you have questions for the group, go ahead and put them in chat. One of the questions that we have is, how do you come up with the recipes? So let's start with Nancy this time.
That's a really good question. I actually did a series of cocktail fudges, and how I came up with that idea is I was at work in a meeting, and I stopped them all and I said, if you could have any fudge in the world, what fudge would you have? And they said, oh, a Captain Morgan fudge. And I thought, oh, this is fantastic. So I went and found an old 1950s cocktail book, recipe book, and started playing it around with the different flavors for fudge. So I think that's book 2, is the cocktail recipes on that. So I'm always looking for something new and different when it comes to that and trying things out.
Judy, how about you? How do you come up with recipes?
I've written 2 cookbooks. One was a memoir cookbook, and one is called Gourmet on a Hot Plate, because right now I only cook with a hot plate and a toaster oven. Zoning means I can't have a stove. So really the recipes I included and the ones Henny cooks throughout are ones that I've cooked for my family and that went into those 2 books.
Maya, how about you?
Very similar to what Judy said. I've had collections of, large collection of recipes that not just from myself, but from my mother, my mother-in-law. In some cases, I could see that they had been cut out of newspapers that are now yellow with age. But inevitably, and I think this is probably true for most of us, if you start with a recipe, you're making changes almost immediately so that it suits your taste and the taste of your family. So I would say, even if I start with a recipe, whether it was definitely if it was my mother's, I would make changes. So I think, over the years, I've collected a lot of recipes, and I also look in the newspaper to see what's there. And again, if there's something that looks like it'll turn out okay, I, of course, if I'm going to use it in the book, can only use 5 ingredients. I have to figure out often how to work around that. And the result is somewhat different, maybe, than the original.
How about you, Leslie?
That's one of the funnest parts of writing, I think. As I'm writing, there are a lot of scenes that take place on the hotline at Gauguin, at the restaurant that Sally works at. She becomes a line cook, and it's a trendy restaurant, and so the recipes are seasonal. So one of the first things I do when I start a book, because so far each of the 4 books have been in a different season, is I research what's growing in our area, which fish are running then, and so I sort of have those in front of me, and I actually just stare at those things and I come up with ideas in my head. I mean, well, these would be interesting combinations of ingredients. So I have them making them, salmon with, seared salmon with tequila, lime sauce or something, and so I'll write these scenes, and then after I've written the book and I've got all these scenes with lots of food in them, then I go back and I have to pick 5 or 6 recipes to put in the book. And so I go through and I just pick which ones I want to do. And then that's the hard part. I have to write the recipe. I have to figure out how to make this thing that I've just invented in my head. But it's okay. I usually can do it because I do know how to cook. So then I make them, and for my, family and friends and dinner parties. And the hardest part, though, is coming up with the amounts, because I don't use recipes when I cook. I'll read recipe books. I love cookbooks, but I'll usually close it and then just sort of make it. And because I taste as I go, you can't do that. You got to have, a teaspoon of this and that. So as I make it, I measure it as I'm putting it in, and then it needs more of that. So I'll measure it again and make notes and stuff. That's the hardest part. But it's really fun coming up with the recipes. It's like being an artist or something, a visual artist, I think. I love that.
Right. Shawn, a great segue into yours are movie sets. So how do you come up with recipes for the books?
Yeah, I'm just basically Leslie's answer is my answer as well, but pretty much the same. Everything you said was exactly what I was thinking to say, because I worked as a line cook. My first line cook job, I think I was 19. And I worked every station in a busy restaurant. So I learned, they always start you out on salads. You can't really mess up a salad too bad, and then they make you, they might let you make a sandwich. And then you move up to the grill, So that was when I started that. And then, I've worked in people's kitchens and with their stuff, like, who knows what they have, you walk in and you bring your own ingredients, but who knows, everyone has different kitchens, places where things are. So you have to kind of bounce around. But I'm very intuitive cook, much like writing. I don't really plan it out. I just kind of go with, it's an instinctual thing. I know this is going to taste good with this, just because I've been cooking forever, And the hard part, like Leslie was saying, is to slow yourself down and be like, oh, okay, someone's going to be following my directions to the letter that maybe doesn't cook all the time. So it really can't be, a giant mess once it comes. I mean, like you said, you can't taste along the way. The only difference for a movie set is you got to take a restaurant dish, and times it by 300 servings. So you got to make sure you have enough to feed 300 people at a time. Or, some days it's 100, but a lot of times it's 300. Depends on what they're doing that day. But that's why it takes forever to get, basically 2 meals a day takes all day long to create and put out and clean up. And they all come at once, like locusts. They come and clear it out and they go back to work. So that's the only difference. Everything Leslie says times 300.
Bharti, I know you don't have recipes in your books, but you've done cookbooks. Are those recipes that you've come up with, and is your approach similar to some of the others?
Yes, well, thank you for asking. I actually, since I was a cookbook author and a food writer, I used to, and I still am, used to developing recipes. And I think this is what happens. If you love to cook and if you cook often enough, you develop a sense of the ingredients, what goes with what, not only how much of something, but how do the flavors combine and create something new and exciting and interesting. And I am still in the process of always creating new dishes. And one other challenge I often face is that I have this ingredient in the refrigerator. What can I make from that? As opposed to always having the ideal ingredients, which would be nice, but that doesn't always happen. I'm also, because I'm so interested in food, and when it was possible to do this, I used to walk, let's say, for example, the downtown area, and I read every menu and see what people are doing, what chefs are doing. It's not possible right now, but that used to be one of my hobbies. So I think food, creating recipes and being able to cook well is a passion. If you have it, it may take you some time. For those in the audience, some of you are maybe struggling with cooking, but you will ultimately come up with really good recipes.
So does everybody test their recipes? You make them?
You have to.
Oh yeah.
Right.
You don't want to. No. You have to. You have to.
You have to test them more than once. And my husband is the tester. He eats it, and he tells me, no, it's not done. I said, I've done it 6 times. He said, no, do it again. So you really have to do it many, many times. That's for cookbooks, not for novels.
One of the other questions that we're getting in the chat, which I think is a fascinating one given the topic, is other than the obvious poisoning of people, how do you come up with the murder? So, there's the poisoning, but each of us have more than one book in a series. We can't just keep poisoning people, right? So how do you come up with the method of murder? Leslie, let's start with you this time.
I actually haven't poisoned anybody in any of my books. I don't think I have. Correct me if I'm wrong, readers, but they just came because of how I decided. I come up with the idea of who's going to die, why they're going to die, and then that kind of points to the death method. And now in the first book, Dying for a Taste, it was a chef's knife, a beautiful rosewood handled chef's knife. That just seemed like the perfect thing. And the reason I did that is because the head chef at the restaurant, it's his prized knife. Some of you might not know this, but chefs have their own knives, and they're very, and cooks, not just chefs, because chef just means chief, right? It's the head of the kitchen. But all cooks have their own set of knives that they take to and from the kitchen. And this was in a locked cabinet, and only he had the key to it. So I thought that was perfect. Plus, but yeah, I don't think just because they're culinary mysteries that it needs to be poisoning. I have people, you know,
other methods still work.
Right.
How about you, Maya? How do you come up with the method?
Well, it does, as Leslie said, kind of grow out of the story and who's being killed and who the culprit is, and you know what weapons are within easy access. Well, yeah, for me, I build each of my books around a theme. And so, for example, my fourth book is called The Telltale Tart. And the theme is, it's Poe that's at the center of that. And there are some, you know, echoes of Poe's stories and so on. And so the, you know, murder method, or the attempted murder method, at least one of the unsuccessful ones, has to do with somebody at Poe's grave taking a drink of something that, you know, brandy or whatever it is. I don't remember what it is they leave at Poe's grave, maybe cognac. You know, so that kind of grew out of the situation that I had there. And I do use a lot of kind of literary influences because I used to teach writing and literature on the college level. So that's where the Dickens thing comes in this latest book. And Hitchcock is one of those themes that is kind of running through all the books, because Granddad is a great Hitchcock fan and vintage movie fan.
So just to sort of follow up on that, let's poll the group. What was the method of murder in your most recent book? Bharti, what was the
recent one? Okay, well, there is, I don't use poison, but there's always the kitchen knife. No, it's not even a kitchen knife. In my case, the criminal used a machete. And so I had to really learn how does one do a crime with a machete. So I had to really do some research and find out. And it seemed to fit the person who did it. Happened to have been a sword fighter, so it fit the person.
So, Nancy, what's the method of murder in your most recent?
Ironically, it's the only one where I poisoned somebody. So, yes, it's poison this time. The one coming out.
And Shawn?
I poisoned someone in one of the recent short stories that I wrote, but I don't think I've done it in a book. I just stayed away from it, I think, you know, just because I thought everyone's going to think I'm poisoning people, but I have used it. In the last book, there was an attempted poisoning in that one. But I was going to say, the kitchen is a dangerous place. I mean, you know, there's lots of ways, you know, someone gets locked in a walk-in freezer. They're not going to be there in the morning, probably, you know. There's lots of ways to, I've done that. There's lots of ways to, yeah. They'll be there. They won't be with us anymore in the general sense. But, you know, it's like real estate. Your bathroom and your kitchen are the two places that, you know, most valuable to fix up, but they're also the places you're probably, you know, going to die or have an accident or something. So kitchens are dangerous. They're cold, they're hot. There's lots of sharp stuff. There's angry people yelling, you know, lots of stuff.
Judy, how about you? Your most recent killing?
The most recent one, it's a physical confrontation, and the victim hits his head on a curb just right, and that's the end of it. But that's my 15th mystery, and I was thinking about that. I have used poison once, digitalis, but mostly for somebody who doesn't like guns. I've had a lot of people shot.
And Maya, your most recent?
Well, you you could tell that, well, the ginger dead one was obviously poison, but prior to that, it was a vehicular homicide. And I've also had lots of people being shot, stabbed, strangled, you know, and I'm working on a smothering in the next one. So I've tried all kinds of methods.
I found the variety interesting. In Game of Scones, it was poison, but Risky Biscuits, I ran over somebody. And the most recent quiche of death, bow and arrow. And that came about much like Nancy's story, in talking with someone at work who mentioned that his wife was a bow hunter. And you know, we find these ideas both for recipes and for methods of murder in the world that we interact with. We're coming up on 45 minutes, and I want to be sure to give everybody a chance to talk about what's next, what you're working on. So let's hear from each of you. Bharti, can we start with you?
Sure, thank you. I'm continuing to write this series, but I have run into a little bit of a situation here. I have to do some research and go to India, and that's not possible right now. So in the meantime, a new idea has come to me with a new series, new private detective, and she's quite hip and fun, and I'm having actually fun with her. So I'm writing that new one also, and I've just done not very much, but I'm enjoying the process of the new one.
Yeah, the current situation has definitely changed some things in terms of research.
Traveling is not possible.
Yeah, Leslie, what are you working on?
So since I retired from being an attorney, my wife and I have been spending half of the year in Santa Cruz, where we've been for many, many years, but we're also now living half of the year in Hilo, Hawaii, on the Big Island. And so my agent recently said, asked me about the idea of coming up with the beginning of a new series. And so I just finished the manuscript for what I hope will be book one in a new series set on the Big Island of Hawaii. So I'm pretty excited about that. And yes, it'll have lots of food, don't worry. But in the first book, it's a sort of a fish out of water story where a gal moves from, she and her wife moved from Los Angeles, visiting the Big Island from Los Angeles. And they're taken out, this takes place in 2018, and they are taken out by a friend to see hot flowing lava. And she sees, but nobody else sees, a human leg or a body being covered over by the lava. And when the other people come back, they're like, really, I don't know. And so she sets out to discover the mystery of the body in the lava. And in the meantime, learns a lot about what real Hawaiian culture is, not the touristy tiki shows that we think of here on the mainland, but what it's really like to actually live on the Big Island. And so it's been really fun writing that. So it's done now, and we'll hope I get to sell it to somebody.
Sounds like the perfect setting. And talk about unusual ways to
die. Yeah, exactly. The tentative title for it is, and you can tell me what you think of this, Molten Death.
Love it. Shawn, what are you working on?
I'm actually taking a bit of a break from the series just for a little bit, but I do have the 8th book written, just waiting for other things to fall into place. But I am working on a standalone domestic suspense novel right now, which I'm really excited about. And I continue to write a lot of short stories. So I have a new short story coming out soon, or maybe it's next year. I can't even remember, but it's about wine. I used to sell wine as well. I used to be a wine salesperson. So I can't get away from the food wine thing. And somebody asked me about the standalone, and they said, well, is there going to be food in it? And I said, well, I can't imagine. They have to eat something. And I think you can tell a lot about a person and a character about what they have in their refrigerator or on their shelves. Because like we ever go to someone's house, you're like, like what's going on What's going on with you? What's going on with your refrigerator? So I think I always like to use it as like a context for what that person actually might be like. So that's
so much for checking the medicine cabinet. Sean's checking the refrigerator.
I'm
right?
in the pantry. I'm like that woman, expired in that commercial. That's what so, but thanks for asking.
Yeah, great. Thank you. Nancy, what are you working on?
Well, I'm actually working on my second Nancy Coco series, which is the Oregon Honeybee series. The second book comes out in January. So I've been working on that and having a lot of fun with things set on the coast of Oregon with all the quirky people. And of course, there are honey tips and honey recipes in that book as well. So got to do all that honey research.
Great. Maya, what are you working on?
I'm working on the 8th book in the series, but just basically having started on it, all I want to say about it at this point is that I've gotten Granddad and Val and her best friend Bethany out of Bayport because the body count was pretty high there. And so they will be going to the other side of the Chesapeake to a gathering that I think everybody who is listening to this panel will be familiar with. And other than that, I do have a couple of articles coming out. Crime Reads this month is going to have an article I wrote about the dark side of gingerbread, which has been associated with death and the demonic through history. And I will also have an article in Mystery Scene, which touches on the dark side of Santa. So maybe you'll see.
Ooh, there's a dark side to Santa? No.
It is very dark.
Judy, what are you working on?
Well, with my other hat on, I write about the history and literature of the American. I have a manuscript and a proposal that are hung up because the publisher closed for 6 months during pandemic. So they're back up, but they haven't picked up the slack. They are also going to reprint one of my 1990s historical novels, so I'm page proofing that right now, teaching that nonfiction course, that fiction course. And I wrote Saving Irene as a standalone, but people like Henny and her sidekick Patrick, and they keep saying they want to see more. So I've got some ideas for a book called Irene in Danger. They're just kind of rattling around in the back of my head. I think I'll do it.
Well, we are getting close to the end. I would like to see everybody's covers again. So if you can do a hold up of the,
I'll just have to go like that.
Of the covers. Or Shawn, you can point.
I will do this. I will do this. This is my anthology.
There you go. And Murder Most Edible.
Of course.
The anthology. If you have, we have time for maybe just a couple of questions from the attendees. As you can see, the covers are very tasty as well, and we're getting a lot of kudos in the comments on the covers. If there are some questions from the group, we'd be happy to take a couple of those before we wrap up. Oh, can you hear what I am up to? I'm working on the 4th book in the Sugar and Spice series. So as I mentioned, Game of Scones, Risky Biscuits, and Quiche of Death. And the 4th one is tentatively titled Night of the Living Bread. So
your title is terrific. I love your title.
Yeah, she has the best titles.
Well, as most of you know, I also write as half of Sparkle Abbey. That sort of set the tone for crazy titles brainstorming with that series, with Desperate House Dogs and 50 Shades of Greyhound and things like that. But a question from the attendees are, what's the best thing you ever ate?
Ooh.
Oh.
I think that's a great question to wrap up with. Bharti, what's the best thing you ever ate?
Well, you know, I'll talk about what is the best thing right now that I ate in this particular period of time when things are difficult to get. Sometimes I went to this Indian restaurant, and I can do this myself at home. Chai and samosa, I can do them myself, but I'm not doing it. So I go to this Indian restaurant, and they had carryouts, and they had those two things, and I just loved them simply because it's a difficult time, strange times. We don't go to restaurants anymore too much. So that was the best food for now.
Great. Leslie, what's the best thing you ever ate?
That is such a hard question, but the thing that flashed into my head was this is probably at least 20 years ago, 25 years ago. I went to a restaurant in San Francisco called Gary Danko, which hasn't existed in years. It was a lobster bisque that, I should try and make it. Anyway, it was just divine.
Sounds divine.
It was.
Shawn, how about you?
I got to go to the Food and Wine Festival in South Beach, Miami. And I think it was 2007 or 2008. But anyway, that was a great day, and everything I ate was wonderful the whole day long because it's just two giant tents on the beach, and you walk through, and like Wolfgang Puck's restaurant was there, and Bobby Flay was there. All the Food Network stars were there, just serving you bite-sized, portions from their menus. And they also give you a wine glass that you can carry around your neck with a chain. And all the wineries were there, so you just walk up and they give you wine because you have your hands full of food. So they serve you wine on your neck, and it was like I'm in heaven. I just never want to leave this place. This was heaven. I live here now. So that was. I ate a bunch of good stuff that day. It was all good. I could go on for hours about it, but the experience was the best thing I've ever ate.
Sounds wonderful.
It was great.
Nancy, how about you?
Well, I have a lot of food allergies. So for me, it comes down to simple flourless brownies. They're moist and chewy and just so good. And I don't get to eat a lot of things. So for me, that's fantastic.
That sounds good too. Maya?
Thing that I remember, I've had a lot of really good meals, but I'm thinking about this molten chocolate cake with passion fruit syrup on it, which was really, really good.
Sounds good.
A really good thing.
Sounds
anyway,
fabulous.
Passion fruit is my passion, and I also love passion fruit sorbet.
Judy, how about you?
I'm not sure about any one dish, but I'm sure, like Nancy and Maya, it was chocolate. Maybe a good dark mousse.
Generally, for me, it would be chocolate, but my absolute favorite meal, I think kind of the theme here is it's about the experience, and Mediterranean pizza in Carmel. Did a drive to Carmel during Left Coast Crime in Monterey. And the pizza was wonderful. The wine was wonderful. They had live music. It was, I think that's part of what makes the food mysteries so popular, and part of what makes our storytelling what it is that it's all a part of the experience of the food as well.
I agree.
Well, we are wrapping up at this point. Anything that any of the panelists would like to share as we close?
Yeah, I think it's
been
really
fun.
the atmosphere that we create in our novels, not just the food, but the total surroundings, sight, sound, smell, touch, and the people, that makes it.
Yeah, I think so too. I love Leslie's idea of the different senses, because with food it is not just taste, but other senses that are involved.
And ultimately, food is the one thing that brings us all together as human beings. Every single human on this planet eats and loves to get together and break bread together, and it's like a sacrament almost. And I just think that's one of the reasons people love culinary mysteries so much. It's so universal.
it's something we all have in common.
Yeah, I agree.
Yep. Yep. Well, thank you so much. You've been great panelists. This has been a ton of fun. I wish that we were in person. So hug, virtually a hug. Hope to see you all in person one day soon. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mary, for everything.